The Utah Jazz just traded for Jaren Jackson Jr., and this kind of comes out of nowhere, but it's super exciting for Jazz fans, especially because their rebuild is coming to an end. The Jazz gave the Grizzlies rookie Walter Clayton Jr., who's been all right this season, nothing crazy. Taylor Hendricks, who's been a disappointing top 10 pick, but he still has a lot of potential. He was out for the season last year, so Memphis could potentially revitalize his career. And then they also get some salaries with Niang and Kyle Anderson, as well as 3 first-round picks. They'll have the Jazz's pick next year, as well as a Lakers 2027 pick and a Phoenix Suns 2031 pick. On the Jazz's side, they obviously get Jaren Jackson Jr., as well as Vince Williams Jr., who's been solid, Jock Landale, who should be a pretty good piece for center depth, and John Conchara's salary hasn't been great this season. For the Jazz, this deal is definitely interesting because from what we've been hearing around the Jazz, they're expected to have a relatively quiet deadline, maybe deal Kevin Love to a championship contender, but instead they do this, and I can't say I hate it. I think it's going to be really good for the Jazz because, especially just looking at their front court next year, defensively, will be Lauri Markkanen, a 7-foot small forward. Then they'll have Jaren Jackson Jr. at power forward, who's around 6'10". DPOY, really, really good defender, paired with Walker Kessler, who's one of the best young defensive centers in the NBA, 7 foot. Good luck scoring in the paint against that team. Not to mention, they have Ace Bailey, who's a pretty solid defender, good scorer, as well as Keontae George, who definitely isn't the best defender, but as a scorer, they're going to have Keontae George, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a pretty good scorer, and hopefully Ace Bailey can become that for them. Then off the bench, they have guys like Bryce Sensabaugh, who should be pretty good for this team. He always drops random 20 points games here and there because when Will Hardy uses him, the dude's a bucket getter. Doesn't do a ton else, but Bryce Sensabaugh should fit nice next to this team because the one thing they are missing a bit after this trade is still scoring because Kessler's not a great scorer, and Jaren Jackson's definitely a scorer, but he's more, he takes what he gets, basically. He's not a shooter, but in the paint, he's definitely a great scorer. For Utah, this is definitely a bit scary because the Thunder do have their pick if it's not in the top 8, and the Jazz are currently sitting around 5th or 4th, and while I don't think Jaren Jackson Jr., without Walker Kessler and just some of the injuries that are going on, I don't think it's enough for them to make the play-in, but I do think they will win a lot more games, so it is a problem that they could end up around the 11 or 12 seed, and the Thunder will end up with their pick. So this trade's good, but I just do think the Jazz either need to continue to tank the rest of this season or make a legit case for a play-in spot because, I mean, if they win almost all the rest of their games, they could get there. But if you look at what he was doing in Memphis, he by himself isn't enough. And I do think a healthy Lowry, a healthy Keontae, as well as some other pieces that maybe they could acquire at this deadline, I think they could make a play-in push. But without other pieces, and if they're unhealthy, then really they should probably stick to tanking just for the rest of this season, and then next year they'll be good. But for Memphis, I like the trade. Ultimately, it was time to move on. They traded Desmond Bane at the beginning of the season. They'll likely trade Ja Morant. I can't see why they would trade Jaren and Desmond Bane and hold on to Ja Morant. Retooling around Ja doesn't make sense to me. He looked like a franchise guy, but at this point with the off-the-court things, I think he's going to end up more like James Harden, where he plays for a lot of teams, and yes, he's a good all-star, but just because of the off-the-court and his personality, he probably isn't going to stick around for very long, as we saw James Harden request a trade again this trade deadline. But getting 3 first-round picks, including a potentially valuable Jazz pick, the West is good, and yes, Jaren should take this team with Lowry and Keontae to the playoffs, but that pick could still potentially be around the middle of the draft, which is not bad. Lakers pick. All it takes is one Luka injury, and the Lakers could be terrible next season. And that 2031 Suns pick is extremely valuable. The Suns will likely be nearing the end of Devin Booker if they haven't traded them already. They'll have none of their picks, so they will likely be in a rebuild state without their picks. And it'll be really valuable for the Grizzlies to have that. From the players' side, Anderson and Niang might actually get moved again. I don't think they're going to stay around for Memphis, but Walter Clayton Jr. definitely has a ton of potential. He's shown it, and we saw that at Florida, but I don't know how good he gets. I do see him being at least a Trey Jones type player where he's very respectable backup point guard in the league. Taylor Hendricks, it'll really depend on if he can be a shooter because he has the size. He's not a bad defender, and if he can get his shooting up, I think he'll be a very solid wing in the NBA, but definitely not the star type. So the actual players they got back, not amazing, but I could see Clayton Jr. making an impact as well as Taylor Hendricks. Ultimately, it's a good deal. I give both teams B+, which is really, really good for a trade. It's definitely a bit of a risk for the Jazz, but I think ultimately the Jazz will still have almost all their own picks. They'll still have some Suns picks, some Cavs, Timberwolves swaps. They still have a lot of their main guys, so it'll be really cool to see what they can do next year and potentially even this year. Thank you so much for watching. Help me at 1,000 subscribers by the end of the NBA season. Subscribe for more trade deadline